I think the number one question on most persons' minds as we see that lockdowns are basically schools are shutting down now again is, well, does shutting down schools actually stop the spread of viruses? So, could you answer that for me?
Yeah, there's a very interesting fact out there that I think most people are unaware of. When the Ontario government reports cases in schools, and whatever the number is that day, a couple hundred or so forth, parents go, "Oh no, these are cases that are being acquired in the school. Maybe it could be my son. It could be brought back home, and so forth." It actually doesn't mean cases acquired in schools. It just means people who attend the school setting have tested positive for coronavirus. So, okay, how much of actual acquisition is happening in the classroom? I put this question to Dr. David Williams as all these school closures were being announced, and he maintained that consistently for many months it has been the case, and even now with these new variants they're discussing, that there's been very few cases of actual in-class transmission throughout the entire province since the whole pandemic began. It is unbelievable, really, that this information and really, I guess, the misinformation that leads people to believe otherwise hasn't been put out there more, because those are the facts. I mean, I guess a child acquires it from their parents or whatnot, and they do go to school, but then they test an entire classroom and they find that the child has not transmitted it to anybody else.
Right. And I mean, if you look at the protocols in place in classrooms, the teachers are wearing face shields plus masks, kids are socially distanced, some have these plexiglass dividers. I mean, there's a lot going on there. So I guess then the follow-up question I would have liked to ask to Dr. David Williams, I'm not sure if you had that opportunity, is, well, that if it isn't the case that transmission happens in schools, then why are you locking them down? Does anybody have an answer to that, Anthony?
Well, he gave a bit of an answer that Peel and Toronto were closing schools because, well, this gives them the opportunity to get up to speed with the testing, and maybe there's some transmission now, so they want to figure it out and so forth. Basically, I think for parents who would like to see schools remain open, it wasn't a very acceptable answer.
Right. And Scott, do you have any thoughts on that? Why are they locking down if it's really not a problem? There are no transmissions, very few transmissions in schools.
Well, it doesn't seem they're following the science, does it? So again, the trope of the politicians that they're just letting the health officers follow the science and they're not scientists falls flat when the scientists say that the science doesn't back the lockdowns, but nonetheless they're going to lock down. So at this point, the rabbit's chasing its tail, and we're wondering, well, what's going on here? And parents they ought to be expressing their outrage.
Right.
Public health officers may not respond to politics; politicians do.
Right. And maybe more of us parents need to be more outraged, at least vocally, or I don't know, are we even allowed to gather in public places, or have those rights been quashed too? I don't even know. Okay, Anthony, recently though, speaking about following the science and the experts, you highlighted that there are 300 healthcare professionals that have called for an end to school closures, and these were health professionals here in Ontario. So an end to school closures in Ontario. Was that met with any kind of openness, or, I mean, clearly it seems to have fallen flat? I don't know.
Well, it seems like the government would really like to keep schools open, but they're up against all these other voices who are pushing to the contrary. You've got teachers' unions who I guess have a bit of a power play going on, and you have ICU doctors who are really kind of acutely focused with the stresses that are very particular to their environment. They'd like to see everything shut down. But pediatricians, really none of them support schools being closed. And any sort of medical professional that is taking, I think, a holistic look at broader society,
Right.
They all have a lot of concerns and generally want to see a more balanced and targeted approach in terms of how we address these things.
My concern is that in the future, I mean, it's not a concern. It's just, I guess I'm thinking out loud here that in the decades that follow, that some child will turn back and say, well, why did you allow this to happen, mom, dad? Or why did the government allow this to happen? My mental health deteriorated. I missed out on so many things and it was not justified in hindsight, my goodness. And, I'm wondering what the future will hold for this. Again, we're going to talk about more after the break about testing. One interesting fact or data in evidence that you provided, Anthony, was that in the Ottawa Public Health, in those schools that they did a pilot project for testing, there were 1,904 tests and only one positive. That was, for me, a very jaw-dropping piece of data. I didn't think that there would be so few positives. Am I right to be shocked by this? Anthony?
Yeah, and I wrote another report about a new variant case that was detected within one Toronto school, and then they tested all 300 kids in that school. Zero positive cases detected. So you've got to ask, what is the utility of all this mass testing when it's really yielding nothing right now?